You know, it's no doubt that Allan Arbus was one of the best character actors of his generation in a myriad of roles. But what he's best known for is something of a breakthrough on television because psychiatry or psychiatric treatment was frowned upon for most in the 1960s, kind of treated like a joke. But his character, Dr. Sidney Freedman on MASH, broke barriers in 2024. We're still benefiting from Arbus's acting because the compassion that he showed his fellow mashers, he was a masher because he helped out, in different ways, even played poker once in a while, has made him one of the most articulate and respected characters played by Arbus in TV history. Of course, he's best known for his famous line, which I use all the time: "Ladies and gentlemen, take my advice. Pull down your pants and slide in the ice." Used in Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, the last MASH episode. But it's a thing, you got to take chances in life to give yourself joy. Now, he was a recurring character in MASH over almost his whole season. He's a Divisional Medical Staff Psychiatrist, frequently summoned to the 4077 to help with mental and emotional health problems suffered by patients who come true, and also much of the staff of the 4077 itself, with Hawkeye being his most frequent patient. He's a first-name basis with nearly everyone in camp, including Colonel Potter. Now, how he showed up in the show is quite interesting because it was played kind of a joke and it kind of established the Klinger character. Now, he first appeared in Season 2, Radar's Report, though in this episode he's referred to as Milton Friedman, economic-wise, by Radar. In this season episode, Sidney is summoned to the camp by Colonel Blake under duress from Majors Burns and Houlihan to do a psychiatric evaluation of Klinger, who was bucking for his Section 8. Cindy was incredulous when he first sees Klinger, asking Henry, "You got me up here to ask him about that? Whether he needs a girdle under that? Whether he seams or straight?" When he reluctantly proceeds with examination with the opening line by asking Klinger, "What's your name, honey?" Eventually he finishes the report in which he states that Klinger will have to say he's a transvestite homosexual and may even have post-nasal drip in order to get out of the army. He gives the report to Klinger to sign with the provision that will remain in his record permanently, meaning he'll have to keep wearing dresses. But Klinger, wanting only his devoutly wished Section 8 discharge, angrily refuses and about to storm out of the office before Friedman reminds him that he forgot his purse. Now, Sidney often found his visits to the camp to be a welcome break from his regular duties. Sometimes he'd show up depressed, sometimes he'd show up finding more direction. The famous episode where the whole camp is pretty well, not say set on fire in a bonfire, but where Potter is trying to get the valves of frustration off. He seemed to find comfort in the people of MASH, and he would visit for card games, but at least one occasion, staying for an extended respite when he was feeling depressed. In Dear Sigmund, after coming one night to play cards, he wound up staying in camp for 2 weeks, and BJ had talked to him about that. He opened up to Hockey and BJ, one of the patients committing suicide, and decided he wanted to get insight into how the 4077 staff withstood their experiences by writing a letter to Sigmund Freud as a form of self-therapy. Of course, the famous episode with Michael O'Keefe, where he basically had got the soldier he was playing back in the foxhole, and he basically attacks him verbally twice during the episode, putting Friedman probably on that path to depression that he suffered in later episodes. As a psychiatrist, he'd also been in medical school and was able to assist the surgeons when emergencies arose. Following his initial appearance in Season 2, he made at least one visit to the 407 in each successive season. Now, in Deal Me Out, his second season appearance, he's in camp for a conference, which turned out to be the weekly poker game, which is its sole purpose in camp, except for a few moments of psychiatric pointers, for which he filches a poker chip or two for making a house call. Now, when a patient, John Ritter, goes berserk and starts firing haphazardly, Hawkeye calls Sidney to control the situation. Now, in Season 3's OR, he paid a visit expecting to play some poker, but arrived in the middle of a deluge of wounded. When Klinger asks again if he's fit for Section 8, Sidney only tells him there's 17 other guys wearing dresses ahead of you. Now, of course, this is where he used his famous expression for the first time. Now, he's referenced in Season 3's Mad Dog and Serviceman, during which a Corporal Travis is brought into camp uninjured but able to move his legs. Hawkeye calls Sidney on the phone to tell him, but Sidney's too busy to visit. He coaches Hawkeye over the phone on how to deal with Travis. Now, but the emotional paralysis leads later. And of course, probably one of the most important episodes of season 4, probably the whole series, is where Jesus show up. It's called Quo Vadis, Captain Chandler. Friedman treats a bomber pilot who's horror over the deaths of the civilians and he bombs, killed him. He's bombs killed, led him to believe he was Jesus Christ. He recommended that the pilot be encouraged to remember and resume his identity, but not his military role. This infuriates another visitor, Colonel Flagg, who quickly concludes that Friedman is subversive, but Sidney refused to be intimidated, and Flagg's subsequent investigations of the doctor evidently turned up nothing useful against him. Now, in Dear Sigmund, Sidney, reeling after one of his patients commits suicide, which he should have seen coming, visits camp to take a break. And he spends the time there making observations of each members of the senior staff. Now, in Hawk's Nightmare, 6th episode after Dear Sigmund, Hawkeye begins sleepwalking, having nightmares about his childhood friends, rendering him afraid to fall asleep. He kind of remembers, but the realities of war combined with his combination of what he called war is causing the problems. Now, in Season 6, War of Nerves, he comes to camp as a casualty. He was doing a follow-up in a foxhole again with a soldier who suffered emotional problems after seeing 3 of his buddies killed within 24 hours. But Sidney and his shoulder have a falling out. And this was the episode where the fire was set to, take care of it. And Houlihan and him have a great meeting because she was starting to feel sexual towards Winchester, and he answered no questions. All she basically was saying this and that about Winchester. She never talked about herself. Now, in Season 7, the Billfold Syndrome, a medic named Sergeant Nielsen becomes dazed. He doesn't recognize himself. Cindy diagnosed condition as Billfold Syndrome and enlists Hawkeye and BJ to reenact a scene at the front replete with banging books on shelves to simulate shell fire. Eventually, it comes out that Nielsen's younger brother had been killed before he get out of a bunker, which caused his condition. Now, Season 8's Goodbye Cruel World, he uses a post-hypnotic suggestion to curb the suicidal thoughts of a Chinese-American sergeant and a bona fide hero named Michael Yee, who had served during World War II but in Europe, not the Pacific Theater. Friedman tells Hawkeye that Yee is conflicted by his guilt. This is the first time he's fought an Asian enemy, and he puts it in his mind to rotate his hand. Now, the big line, of course, he has to kill Chinese to be a good American. He has to kill himself to be a good Chinese. He then adds that Yi has been trying to kill himself since he arrived in Korea, which is why he's volunteered for so many dangerous missions. Now, in Bless You, Hawkeye, Season 9, he begins sneezing uncontrollably and breaks out in some kind of rash. All surgical tests turn up negative, and Potter can only conclude that Hawkeye's symptoms are psychosomatic. And then Friedman finds out that he was thrown in the water by one of his cousins, and he basically despised the firm but kept it down. Hawkeye had suppressed the incident until a wounded soldier came into camp after falling in a ditch of moldy water. The similar odor triggered that, and that's kind of the PTSD especially he had. Now, in Pressure Point, Season 10, Sidney's patient this time is Colonel Potter, who begins to doubt his own surgical skills following a surgical error that Hawkeye corrected. Potter goes back and forth on several times, asking him consultation, but then not saying anything. Sidney gets him to get him finally open up with his fears, and he tells him not to let his fears dictate his actions. Potter gets the message and successfully goes back to surgery. Of course, goodbye, farewell, and amen. He breaks Hawkeye of his PTSD stupor when he's in under mental care, because he had asked a woman on a bus going back to camp. He was scared that the Chinese or the enemy would find it. Instead of, he kind of processed it like she had killed a chicken, but he killed his own baby. And Sidney basically was chastised by Hawkeye, and he said you had to get it out of the open to get back to yourself. Now, when Sidney sent him back to 407 to put him back in the fire, which was his solution for a lot of things, he does call Sidney for a follow-up, and he said, they have a discussion about what's going through Hawkeye's mind. And later during surgery, when an 8-year-old girl is brought in for Hawkeye, Potter offers a switch, but Hawkeye declines, which convinced Sidney that Hawkeye's recovery is complete. Now, this is left open-ended. I don't think in real life Hawkeye would be as easygoing because he had the safety of camp. I think he would have suffered from PTSD later on. And, of course, the last line he had in the series repeats the pull down your pants and slide in the ice line. He was doing his departure in the OR episode. Now, when Radar was written out a series, it was originally planned by MASH creators for Sidney to join the cast as a regular. But Allan Arbus did not want to commit to ending more a recurring role, so the character continued making at least one appearance per season. Now, Friedman has been described in Psychology Today as the finest positive fictional depiction of a psychiatrist on television, respected, caring, skilled, and professional, using reasonable methods to help the mentally ill. Now, in Dear Sigmund, the big quotes, of course, Dear Sigmund, I've been feeling somewhat frustrated lately, so I came to a kind of spa. The waters are pretty good here, and the inmates have an interesting defense against carnage. Insanity in the service of health. There's something special about this place. You give life here. I'm running a little low on that right now. So, Allan Arbus, a lot of Allan Arbus, the human being in the character of Sidney Freedman. And I think if you look at character actors or the method actors on TV in the 1970s into the 80s, he's probably one of the best. Every time he would appear, it would brought the episode to another level. If it was a 3.5-star episode, it would go directly to 4 stars. And with the great skill of the actors on the show, Frank Burns was the comedic, but the scene, the Battle of the Wits, with Colonel Flagg and Sidney there in that famous episode. But BJ, kind of like the poor man's Hawkeye, there's an interesting conversation when Friedman had spent too many days at the camp, and BJ is kind of doing the different jokes and stuff like that. It's pretty weird. But when Sidney shows up, there's always an interesting... This is kind of like what MASH was at the time. Even though what some people criticize after Frank Burns left, it got a little bit more maudlin. I think Sidney Freedman, he explained... A lot of people sought out mental health for 2 reasons back in the day. The late, great Phil Donahue, who had different shows on mental health and, sexual health and stuff like that. How some people couldn't face their sexuality, would commit suicide. But here's Sidney Freedman. And it's hard on psychiatrists and psychologists across the world because how can you... This is probably the most well-known fictional psychiatrist or psychologist ever. Who can compete? It's like he's the Wayne Gretzky of characters in relation to that category. And to me, he should have been there more often, but the problem is you're not going to make it MASH starring Sidney Freedman. That's what it would have had. So his character on there, it's a 5-star character. And my unfortunate, I never had a chance to meet the gentleman, but I talked to Barry Morse about his acting. And Barry Morse said he is a stage actor on television. Like I said, you can almost see the stage presence, a very, very well-trained actor. And Allan Arbus, again, when he passed, was a big loss for the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing here, we're a MASH podcast. Let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.